My name is Nisa Floyd. I'm the program coordinator here at Atlanta Contemporary. That is a nonprofit organization whose mission it is to change the way we all see art. And in the middle of a pandemic where all of our programs are virtual, we are literally changing the way, not only the way that we see art, but the way that we exhibit art and the way that we share art and the way that we support artists. So today we actually are partnering with GOWRKGRLS to talk about what it looks like to be an entrepreneur and to be a self-sustaining brand and individual. Porsha Thomas is the creative strategist and content creator who runs GOWRKGRLS, a business development consultancy for women entrepreneurs, and teaches DIY business leaders and ladies how to successfully market their ventures and all the things that they are interested in doing. So Porsha, I'm gonna let you take it away and introduce our panelists.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. I'm Porsha. I am that person that she said. I run GOWRKGRLS. So we're essentially a resource for women entrepreneurs. I wanted to create a community because I needed one as a DIY woman entrepreneur, and that's what I did. So we provide access to strategists and consultants to help women workshop their businesses, their plans, specifically marketing, branding, and sales. We introduce people to people like my friends on the panel here who we'll get to know. So helping solopreneurs and DIY women entrepreneurs DIY whenever they probably can't necessarily afford to hire a consultant themselves. So that's what we do. I love also these conversations that we have. So it's teaching women what to do for their business and also having these type of events where we're having real convos and building camaraderie. People cry at GOWRKGRLS events. I know, Sydia, we had that at the last Work Life event. So if you need to cry, just cry. It's okay. It happens all the time. So my friends on the panel, these are my real life friends, and they've got great stories. I'm going to introduce them briefly, but let them tell you their story. So I've got Sydia, who I just called out. She is a self-care practitioner, life skills educator. She's a wellness guide, and she runs the Everyday Creative, which is a lifestyle studio dedicated to helping people design personal care systems, because we all need that. And I've got Dr. Nicole Cabrera Salazar. She's an astronomer. She's passionate about social justice in science and technology. She runs Movement Consulting, and it's a social innovation company that's disrupting science and tech by empowering marginalized people to be their whole authentic selves, which is what this convo is about. So Nicole is going to give us a lot of good stuff. And then Mr. Paul is here. He's an artist. He creates large-scale figurative abstract murals, experimental music, short films, and he runs the Museum of Modern Perspective, which you see in his background. It's at the Met and Adair Park. And I will let you guys take it away on your own to give us a little bit more about you. We can start with Sydia. Tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me, Porsha, first and foremost, and Nisa, of course, for Atlanta Contemporary hosting this. I'm very excited about this. And just to keep it short and simple, as Porsha so eloquently said, I'm a wellness guide, self-care practitioner, and owner of a small lifestyle boutique that really specializes in helping people start from the foundation up and focusing on their self-discipline, time management, and self-care practices and rituals on a daily basis. A lot of us overlook ourselves. We have a lot of dreams, a lot of goals. We want to be efficient. We want to be organized. We have to be all these things in order to eventually find this realm of success. And what I tend to do is just focus on the first step, focus on the foundation, and the foundation is you, how you see yourself, and how you care for oneself, and really put that as a priority every single day. So yeah, glad to be here.
I'm happy to be here because I love hearing Sydia talk. So any opportunity is awesome. And my work stems from the fact that, I came up through academia. I'm a trained astrophysicist. That's what I got my degree in. But while I was in graduate school getting my PhD, it was such a toxic environment that I ended up having to take a 4-month medical leave of absence because I was going through a major depressive episode. And it was a whole, I had to get on medication and all this stuff just because of the level of microaggressions, the level of, unnecessary competition, being excluded from things, all of that. And it was to the point where, this was kind of, becoming an astrophysics professor was my dream, right? That I had worked so hard just to get there. And then, 3-4 years into my program, I was like, I hate my science. I don't want to do this anymore. And I wanted to leave my field. right? Which is not a coincidence. It's really an aspect of the environment. And so what I did is I stayed 2 more years, miraculously, and I finished my PhD. And then I started my business where I help these same, departments and organizations and institutions that were exclusive to me and to other folks, right? And I'm helping them transform their culture so that marginalized people can thrive there. And I love what Sydia was saying. I also come from a background of like therapy and focusing on the self and kind of I've done 8 years of therapy. So by now I'm very, very, very focused on kind of the wholeness of human beings, right? And so that's kind of my foundation where I start is okay, scientists, these marginalized scientists are whole people and they deserve to bring their whole authentic selves to work. So how can we change the culture around them so that they can actually just do their science, which is what they're there to do.
Oh, hey, all right. What's up? How's everyone doing today? Okay, cool.
We're great.
That's cool. Yeah, we're all alive, so it's cool. Let's see. Well, I'm Paul, Mr. Paul. I started the Museum of Modern Perspective back in 2017, basically because I wanted to, and it's basically like an extension of the art that I have been doing for several years as a form of therapy for dealing with the bullshit that I was dealing with in my life. It just kind of formulated back in 2017. I got fed up teaching. I was like, this is some dumb shit. I decided to basically follow my dreams, which is to keep creating, artwork therapeutically. And then as a result of creating a museum, I ended up, basically creating a space for other people to come create their own reality, and that's been pretty cool. But it's just when I was teaching, there was not an emphasis on creativity and individual thinking. But I had students that were, very creative, and I encouraged creativity, even if they didn't feel like they were creative, because I knew that artistic expression is a form of therapy. And I've learned over the years that it's very therapeutic. So, I felt like it was necessary to open up a space where people can create their own reality. That's what I do. I come here, color, I feel good about myself. When people come here and create whatever they want to do, let's say they want to have an art show or, a video shoot or film shoot, whatever they need, it's a resource. It's cool, So yeah, that's what I do, and that's what it's all about.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys, for those intros. We all are happy to get to know you. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about. I had a planned first question, but now I want to just go based off of the conversation. So, Paul, you're talking about being a teacher. Let's talk about what you guys were doing before now. This is kind of like my first question. The original master plan. We're supposed to do things right? We're in society. We have societal norms. We go to college. We drop some G's. We get a degree. We're supposed to get jobs. Everything's supposed to work out. So what was the original master plan? And what were you doing pre your business ownership right now?
Like I said, before I was doing teaching, I was before I started the museum, I was teaching, doing design shit. And, I would go teach all day, try to, enlighten people to whatever, you know what I mean? I would do that all day. Then I would feel like a piece of shit at the end of the day because I was seeing how hypocritical education was and how it didn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? So I had to, in my mind, I had to make sense of all that. But after I would leave, the job teaching, I would come and color. I would sit down, I would lay on the floor, and I would just color. This all started, I started coloring back in 2007. And I started teaching in 2008. And it was just I started even getting stressed from being on the job. I was teaching West Atlanta off of Bankhead. And it was seeing the bullshit that was going on in the school system you know, how they were doing like the teacher scandal and all that bullshit. Witness that real time, you know, it was kind of like a mind. So I didn't know how to process my feelings, you know what I'm saying? So one way that I started doing was code. But that being said, fast forward 10 years after that, 10 years continuously coding and chilling. It was like, you know, now that I'm old, I feel like, you know, it's not all about me. Yeah, I made a museum for my art, but it's like, if you're somebody and you have something that you want to do, you can do it here without having to jump through the hula hoops or any bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Because I experienced that. I experienced dealing with bullshit and just trying to be someone who says, hey, I do art and I want to go here and show it or go here and do it. But running the hurdles, doing that shit.
We'll talk more about that.
Yeah. So I don't know if I went off on a tangent. But
a little bit. Save that for the next question. Okay.
It all just rolls together. It's like,
no, but we got to break it up. Who's next? Sydia, tell us your original master plan.
Oh, Lord. See, all I knew was that I had to go to school. That was the whole plan.
My mom was like, you have no other
go to school, basically.
Yeah.
And it set me up where I ended up coming down here to go to historically Black college. I ended up transferring and going.
Originally?
I went to Spelman College originally, and
where are you
it was
from originally?
Originally I'm from New York City. I'm all the way from New York City, and I knew I wanted to get out of New York and come down to Atlanta. As I always say, Little John and Usher called me down here, and I definitely heard the call, and I answered. I got on a plane and arrived. Okay, yeah. And I did the Spelman School thing, ended up transferring to Savannah College of Art and Design. And just like Mr. Paul was saying, when piggyback off of him, it took me a really long time to get what the system was. Mm-hmm. Like, I really kind of bought into it. I enjoy just learning in spaces, to be quite honest. Mm-hmm. And the more I got into my academic journey, I started like really questioning a lot of things. Like, I loved going to school. I loved being a writing major. And what we were doing was sitting at these tables and just having really, really deep intellectual conversation. And I loved that. But it was costing me like 50 G's a year. Yeah. Which is crazy. And like, I don't want to focus on the money per se, but the money has definitely been the motivation for me, in a sense that it struck this chord in me, like, this is unfair, that this type of knowledge, access to conversation should not be this expensive. Mm-hmm. And then I just started really questioning. Once I graduated, I knew what the next step was supposed to be. I knew I was like this highly educated African-American woman down in Atlanta. And I knew the next step was supposed to be to get some like fabulous adult job. Right. But something in me knew, like, I was different. I am like this opinionated person. I'm very respectful, but I have opinions. And I got a face. Yeah, I got a face that makes faces, you know. And while in school, I really recognized, like, because I was a writer, that I really clung to stories. I really liked understanding, like, a person's why, basically. That interested me more than like the final product. And so I really got interested in small businesses. I was very like, oh my God, how are you like a person and you own an entire store? Like, how did that even happen? And so I dedicated myself to working to small businesses, and small businesses that I aligned with the owners or aligned with the clientele, or just was interested in the industry. And so you're talking to like a mid-30-year-old, a little bit younger than mid-30, that has never had a corporate job, because from the onset, I knew like it wasn't made like for my soul. Because even in the small businesses, eventually I was like, oh my God, look at all this rules, and oh Lord, this is like a dictatorship, and Lord, I got to be me, you know, like to a point, you know, not too off the chain. And eventually that kind of led me into this path of being a nanny. And I started working very intimately with a lot of families in Atlanta. And to my surprise, I saw the pitfalls of it, don't get me wrong, but I definitely saw the pros of it. I saw that I could really have authentic dialogue with, yes, albeit like smaller human beings, but in some way I knew that I was being a positive, I don't know, path for them. Like I knew that them coming in contact with me, not only was I like this Black woman, but like I had a sense too. And I thought about things differently. And I was also an entrepreneur in my soul. And I wanted to share that with people. And in that journey, I came to realize how a lot of people do not have systems in their household that create a larger problem, I would say, for the parents, for the child, for how we all learn how to cope with things. And so I felt in order to be of service to people in the way that I felt comfortable, I had to really create this narrative and a brand that wasn't a glorified nanny, but really brought into perspective like what it is, what my specialties were, and how I felt like I could best work with you. So I just took all of that experience and created the Everyday Creative, basically.
Love it. Look at that. Okay, Nicole, tell us.
So I am the kind of person that had like a 5-10 year plan, right? And so when I was in college, I think was the first time like I took an astronomy class, and I realized, in my junior year of college, I was a little bit late. I didn't have like the straight path that a lot of my white peers did. But I did the internships. I was like, okay, what do I have to do to become this like astrophysics professor, right? And then it was like my entire path was laid out for me in academia. It's like you do your 5-6 years, your PhD, which you get your master's along the way during that time. Then you do a 1 to 3 year postdoctoral research, position. You do 1 or 2 of those, sometimes 3. Then you apply for professor jobs, and you get that, and then you work really hard for 5 years, and then you get tenure, and then that's like your permanent position, right? So it was like basically my entire life was like already planned out. And by the time I was dealing with a lot of battle fatigue, from my department, and just like kind of having to both like counter microaggressions, like counter stereotype threat, also try to do my science, also support people like me, right? Like, so I was so exhausted. Right. And by the time I was like, I'm going to leave. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, that was devastating. It was devastating because I was like, what am I going to do? I have no plan, right? And I was like, kicking myself, because I was like, if I had done physics, then at least I would have lab experience, and you can kind of take that into industry anywhere. But I was like, what am I going to do with a PhD in astronomy if I'm not doing astronomy? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? And so I went to career counseling, and I was counseled by an angel for like 3 years. I did, regular career counseling, and she was the one who really saw potential in me. She told me from the very beginning, like, I see you having your own thing. I see you like writing a book, or I see you having like your own kind of thing. And I was like, okay, lady, like, I'm just trying to get a job, But she ended up nominating me for the Georgia State's first TEDx event. And so I did, they said, oh, you can do, she nominated me. They accepted the nomination. And then they reached out to me and they said, you can talk about your research if you want. And I was like, no, like, I don't want to talk about my science, but I do want to talk about, diversity in STEM. And I had to do all this research in order to give that talk, because I wasn't an expert at the time, right? And that's the thing that I feel like really kind of catapulted me where I am today. But as far as a plan, like, ever since that time, it's been like a stumbling into all of these things, because I never imagined that I would be an entrepreneur. I always thought business was really boring. Mm-hmm. I really like science. I like creating things. I like the humanities and all that stuff, but not business. Like, that was not for me. So it's been a very interesting, like, learning curve this entire time, where I'm just literally like falling, like, I fell into this community right? I've learned so much, and I've gotten so much, from Go Work Girls and from Porsha and stuff, and just like the people and connecting to that environment. But it's been like very bootstrap kind of thing, just because I don't have that background of like having a business. But I do remember like when I was very young, like I'm like looking back and I'm like, damn, like it was always kind of slated. But when I was young, I remember like reading The Babysitter's Club, right? And I started a club. Like I was like in the fourth grade, I started a club, but it wasn't like, I don't even remember what it was supposed to do, but I organized people. And then like I started a dog walking business when I was like in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
I like completely forgot about that, but it was just like,
I
guess
that was happening.
Yeah, like that industriousness was always there, but like I never
didn't like channel it to be anything.
Right.
That moment. Yeah, that's exactly it. So yes, that's what I want to talk about next, because I was the same way. Like I put on magic shows. I don't know magic at all, but I was like 8. I invited everybody to my room and I had like a table set up. I made a top hat out of construction paper and I was like, I'm a magician. This is my magic show. I sold soap like to my family, but I didn't know that I was an entrepreneur. I had no clue. But yes, I mean, and then I created a newsletter, like, because we had Canon print shop. I was going to convert our garage to a coffee shop. Like I had all these ideas, but I didn't know that I was an entrepreneur. I thought I need to go to college and I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to write for like Glamour or Cosmopolitan or some glossy. But so going along those lines, like what, having your own thing, like first of all, did anybody else kind of feel like you were going to grow up and have your own thing? But if not, what caused you to be like, this is what I have to do? And how did you actually like accept that and then decide to go ahead and do it?
Well, I'll start. As Nicole was speaking, it was like, I didn't have the language to understand what I was. Mm-hmm. I just had the courage to keep going on in my path. I knew what didn't feel right to me. And something in me, kept on responding to, I know what I'm supposed to do, but something in this doesn't fit me. And instead of just like dwelling on like, this doesn't fit, I was like, well, what does feel right? And I kept following that feeling, because the idea of being an entrepreneur, it didn't seem like real to me at all. One, because I'm not a business person, as Nicole said before. Like I never wanted to get an MBA. That never was one of my dreams. But I did have this thing with humanity, with talking to people. I loved in meeting people. The word entrepreneur, it didn't really come into my journey until I really became like my own self into my like adulthood.
Yeah, and I wonder if that too has to do with how we are. Like Lubbock, Texas is where I'm from. I hadn't even seen a Black person driving a Benz. Like I went to Houston. That's the first time I saw someone driving a luxury car, a Black person. I was like, whoa, like my mind was blown. So if I think it's like different to drive a luxury car, I mean, I've never seen that before. How can I even imagine being an entrepreneur in Lubbock, Texas? I wonder if that has something to do with it too. What do you guys think?
I think even though it's from New York, and of course they're Black-owned businesses, there's something for me being in Atlanta and it being like one connection away. Owner is right here. These are all majority small businesses. It became very tangible to me. It became something that was doable. And it was like, in order to peek behind the curtain, I said, I need to like extinguish whatever fear or whatever doubt it is that like I couldn't see myself doing this. So I try to like put myself in areas, in places where there were going to be Black entrepreneurs, work for them, see what their leadership qualities were, what I did like, what I didn't like. I was just taking everything in, because even though I wasn't comfortable enough saying, I think I'm an entrepreneur or I am an entrepreneur, I knew the value in like figuring that out for myself. And like, I was always going to have to determine what type of entrepreneur I was. Like I knew even if you had the title, I had to be very specific in how I wanted to represent myself. Like I am skilled. I do know that. I have multiple abilities and multifaceted. It was just like, what lane was I going to choose for myself as opposed to, oh, you went to school for writing, be a writer. Oh, you do this, well, do that. Like, I had to really ask myself, what do I want to do every single day that I could live with? Like, that's what I started asking.
And I feel like it's an ongoing process too, because things change. You're constantly things I thought about in 2016 for Ladypreneur League, which is now Go Work Girls, is completely different. What do you guys think about this question that has gone to a whole new thing?
Jessica, can you hear me? Oh yeah. So just to kind of piggyback off this, so I had no idea any of this was gonna take place. You know, basically, I went to school. I was studying science and all that shit. I was gonna be a doctor or whatever. Ended up being a teacher. I'm just like, oh, this is life, right? It's random. I didn't know it was gonna happen. Like as a kid, just like what Porsha and Sydia was saying, like childhood experiences kind of helped to kind of push me to where I'm at, because as a kid, I was, I sold things that I didn't want. I would pander those to my friends. Also, I learned how to cut hair at a young age. So I was cutting people's hair when I was young, and also when I went to college, and that was just like a real easy hustle. So I learned how to, do things, be resourceful, just use my mind. It's real basic stuff. I even taught myself design in college. Didn't have to learn design. I just figured out, what is that? How do I, get to that? You just use your mind to figure things out. So now, just fast forward, all this is just a culmination of how I learned how to interact with people from childhood, and it's like, I don't even consider myself an entrepreneur. I'm just like, I'm the dude that can help you do what you got to do. And that's it. You know what I'm saying? And we have a good rapport. Everything's cool. I enjoy it. And the cool thing about entrepreneurship or whatever, or how I kind of channel my shit, I prefer to work with creative people. And naturally, those are the people that come my way. So creative people tend to be more cool, less drama, because they're kind of creative. They got some other shit going on. So it's like, to end up in this situation was just on some random shit, because basically I was doing what I was already doing, but I just switched gears and allowed other people to kind of do the same shit, which is just be creative, So it's just, I don't even really I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. I'm just power, that power, Hey, power.
What do you guys think about that? Because I feel like this kind of leads into mindset things. I have, imposter syndrome. Like, even though this is a virtual event, I was nervous before, and I'm at my house chilling right now. But I feel like it's what do you guys, should you embody this? I am an entrepreneur, or is it not okay? But I want to know what you guys think about Paul being just Paul instead of saying I'm an entrepreneur. Is there a different feeling that comes along with that, or not? Do you guys have an opinion about that?
Well, can I just very briefly address the last question?
Yes.
So when I was in career counseling, something that really opened my eyes, because academia is very rigid, right? So it's you do the next 20 years, and that's how the path is laid out. So in my head, I was like, I can't do anything else with this degree, right? But when I went to career counseling, Ashley Watts, shout out to her, she was like, careers are malleable. We used to have careers where, you work at a company for 50 years and then you retire, right? But it doesn't work that way anymore. Now, if you stay more than 5 years at a place, you're stagnant, And so, not only that, she taught me that, I could, whatever literally I could think of, I could do that thing. And then it could evolve into something totally different. And it sounds so simple, but it totally blew my mind, because I was like, what? I can do that? It's like she gave me permission and created a space, in our, weekly meetings or whatever, where that was remotely possible. And it wasn't before, for me, because I wasn't given that option. I was told that if I left my field, I was a failure. So when I got my PhD, to my department, I was a failure because I didn't make it in science, right? And so I think that was really something that it was like the kind of seed that made me start believing that I could shape whatever I wanted to do. Right. And so that was really important. And I just wanted to emphasize that.
Yes. So, yeah. Okay. That's kind of like the push will make you go, which is something I got from Paul. I can't pretend like that's mine. But so, yeah, you had this thing that's happened that made you be like, all right, this is what I need to do. That could have been taken negatively. Like, yeah, I guess I get a little bit motivated from negative things that happen. I don't know why I'm saying a little bit, because that is absolutely what happens for me. But anyway, so the other question, Nicole, if you want to take it from there, what was I saying? Oh, the labels. And Holly is chatting. Hello, hey girl, Holly. But she's saying how labels have so much weight and the expectations from the outside world. So what do you guys think about labeling yourself entrepreneur or just a guy who helps you with your creativity things?
I have struggled with this question just personally too, because as you said, I feel like I have this imposter syndrome, but at the same time, I want to present myself with confidence and like I really know what I'm doing and how I'm going to solve your life problems. Like I want you to have that confidence in me, but I also don't want to present myself as this like all-knowing Miss Cleo that has some black girl magic and is going to like ding you, and then all of a sudden everything is going to work out. So finding that balance, I think one of the things that Nicole really struck on just now for me was like this concept of failure too. Like the fact that she could have been so successful in her academic career, but because you decide to have this degree fit you in another way, that we grapple with like, oh my God, I'm not a success in the traditional way. Right. And I think that is what I dealt with. I had done all these things that I knew were like, okay, so you out here doing a little something with your life, I guess. But because my writing didn't end up with me being like some New York Times bestselling author, apparently, I wasted all my money, wasted my time, but something inside of me knew that was not the case. And unlike Nicole, I get very nervous asking for help and guidance from people. I mean, it terrified me because while at school, I had built myself up as this Black woman in school that was very self-assured, actually. Like, I come across as I have the confidence. Like, look at me speak now. I sometimes can't believe myself here and there. But then when I, like, really sit with myself, I really tended to doubt, like, could I really do this? Am I really about this? Like, am I lying to myself, really?
That's like a whole nother convo. Because, we talked about we're Black women. Yes, we're strong. And so we can't present this, oh shit, I actually feel a little bit insecure right now. But we can, but it's like, who are we not wanting to present that to? My friend the other day was like, when I posted this post for promoting this event, like how I felt being the only Black student in Lubbock, Texas. And I was like, man, so many people are commenting on this. It's making me uncomfortable. And she's like, why? And I'm like, I don't like showing my vulnerability. Like, because of that reason. I think what is that? What is that, Sydia?
Like, as I'm sitting here watching Nicole, like, she is really talking through her story. And it's like, I will do that, but only when I feel like very comfortable with the person. And like, we have to really know each other. Like, even though I know my story can be used as a tool like that, I do have those like vulnerable
parameters.
Yes, I like being in control of who knows my story too, oftentimes, because I don't want it to be used against me in a way that I'm like unprepared for, basically. Yeah, because it's like, I feel that insecurity in me, so it's like, let me not open that door for anyone else to peek at that. But within this process, I've also learned that all those little insecurities in me that we call, I'm not the only one coping with them. I think that's a part of this journey. And the more we speak out about like, no, we're real people and no, we feel this, for other people that are going through school or wondering what their path is, hearing this aligns with some of what they're feeling as well, too.
Yeah, I agree.
After years and years of being like self-reflective and coloring has helped with that. This is just to address what Sydia said. But it's like, once you like start reflecting on like what's important to you, you know what I'm saying, and how you feel, and how you fit into the world, is fuck all that other bullshit, you know, because same way, like I said, I was teaching, I was like, should I quit this shit? I got my mama in my ear. Oh, baby, Lord, no, baby, stick it out, baby. Oh, baby, the kid, they need you, baby. You gotta teach them science. But I'm fucking having goddamn panic attacks and shit. Like, if you've been educating, it's a whole nother, like, shit show. It's a mind fuck, you know, because it's like, what? You know, people are trying to tell you one thing, but it's totally the other. So you have to check yourself. You got to go look at yourself in the mirror. And you got to be like, well, goddamn, what the fuck? What am I here for? You know what I'm saying? Then it's like, how long am I going to fucking be here? Should I give a fuck about what these motherfuckers think? Fuck no. You know what I'm saying? And so that's basically how I overcame what you're going through today. You know, because these are just normal things that people deal with, you know. I mean, and that's it, because it really, that's what all this shit is about. You know, you have to
I agree.
Empowered, you know.
Yes, I completely agree. But the empowerment is a process. And I don't want to pretend like, because when I hear people say that, it's like, yes, I know. Don't give a shit. You're right. Yes, yeah.
But then the thing is doing that, because I mean, we're talking about this. Like I was telling Nicole, my anxiety that I suffer from. So I was like, how I have this feeling. I know that I'm supposed to do all these things. Hold space, be one with yourself, blah, blah, blah. I was like, but then the shit doesn't go away. You know what I'm saying? So how do I actually do that?
The only thing that I have found, like one of the things I have found is finding the community, to be quite honest. Mm-hmm. Like finding my people has really made me recognize that I'm not the only one going through this. And in a weird way, it wasn't until I was very clear, even though I had these issues with grappling, is this really me? I still had the perseverance to stay on the path. And that let me know that I could do this. I was built for this. Even though I had self-doubt, it was something still kept me going. And I didn't ignore that part of me ever. You know what I mean? So it was how do I feed that consistently? And doing that, asking myself those questions, as Mr. Paul's talking, I know I was dealing with this, so coloring and crafting is one of those things that helped me. But conversation, the older I have gotten, I recognize finding that community of people where I can be authentic with and share my vulnerabilities. And it might not be in every conversation where I'm oh my God, this is that. But in those moments that I know that they're going to see it and understand it, the value of that has been priceless. You know what I mean? It really, really, really has, because you can't feel alone in all of this. You really can't. You have to know that this is a process and you're going to doubt yourself here and there, but you got your people too.
Yeah.
No, and that's tight. And basically what you're doing is you recognize something that's bothering you. And just like with doing, whatever, you can do something creative, and you also can talk to people. All you're doing is channeling your energy, and that's a good thing. Yes. You're not keeping it on the inside where that shit can eat your ass up, Yeah. You're actually dealing with your process, and you're being reflective. You're saying, what the fuck is going on? Why is this like this? They call it metacognition, thinking about things. This is what people don't know how to do. This is what I was telling my students, how to do, because your mind will make you fucking go bananas. Yeah. You have a fucking panic attack. You have a fucking stroke. You look at all this goofy shit that's going on in the world, then you're trying to figure out how you fit in all this shit and how you can keep thriving and all that shit. Mm-hmm. You got to think about thinking. You got to use the metacognitive skills and, and channel your energy. So you know how to do that. And that's the thing. People have to figure out what works for them. And that comes from self-reflection, shutting the fuck up, meditating.
Absolutely. And contacting the everyday creative, because that's exactly, Mr. Paul, what I'm here to do, because that process is very, very difficult in real life. When people talk about adulting and crap, that's the crap that they're talking about. And to hold yourself accountable, for you to ask yourself those uncomfortable questions, to listen to the answers, and then to do something about it. Lord Jesus, that is difficult. It takes a very I mean, I'm not trying to give us props or anything, but a very strong person to do that.
Right.
But I also think it helps the greater good when all of us do it. And so if some of our skills can really lend itself to helping people on their journeys, like that's what my platform is. I think it's vastly important. Let me help you through that process, because self-reflection, and let's be honest, a lot of people in our community too have issues when it comes like trying to deal with therapy and saying like your painting was your therapy, and the fact that you say that is so positive, but a lot of people wouldn't even want to associate basically the two. You know what I mean? Like, because it's that type of emotional stuff, we know it's going to come up. And so instead of like calling it therapy, I feel like we have to call it something else. And that's what the Everyday Creative was grappling with all this time. But yes.
Really quickly, just because you said so much and you all have said so many amazing things, but Thea, you just said, I'm not trying to give myself props, right? So even in that, you weren't allowing yourself to own your expertise. And so I want to share with you and reaffirm for you, you are an expert in your craft and in your industry, and you have every right to speak as if you are an expert. All right. So
thank you, Nisa. Thank you. And this is the space that we like, because you can see me, you know what I mean? You can see me in a very real way. I had confidence issues, but I never had it around my people, because people have always been able to see the light. And in those moments say, girl, wait a minute, like we have to do that for each other. So thank you. And I do receive that. I appreciate that though.
And I think that's, again, like speaking about community, I know that Nicole, you mentioned earlier, having a mentor, and I actually worked with Ashley Watts, and she is amazing. You all talked about having community. Can you share with the participants, how do you find community? Because it sounds nice to have, but it's hard to create and foster, and maybe that could be a tool that they could use.
So actually, I want to go back to, I took so many notes while Sydia was talking, because it always sparks a lot of ideas for me. But one thing I wanted to respond to, Sydia, is that, you mentioned like vulnerability, and I'm able to share my story. Like, I've been in therapy for 8 years, like sharing so many vulnerable things that by now I'm like pretty much conditioned to like be able to talk about it. And Porsha, by the way, I do an Instagram live every Wednesday on my platform for the last year. And I still get nervous too, right, by the way. But I think that, so aside from the fact that like I have the practice, it's literally like the practice of sharing like my story and being vulnerable, right? Because I've done not just individual therapy, but group therapy and couples counseling. And that involves being vulnerable, not just in front of your therapist that you then say bye and you don't see that person until the next week, but you being vulnerable in front of your partner, very vulnerable. And then also in front of with a group of people that are all going through something similar. But I think that vulnerability is also a matter of privilege, right? Because Sydia, you brought up something really, really important, because you said that like, as a Black woman, your story can be used against you, right? In a way that, like I experienced some of that, but not as much, because like, I'm not like, I don't experience anti-Blackness, and I'm also like light-skinned, So I feel like there's definitely an element there to where like, there is the space for me to be vulnerable. But not only are you dealing with like petty bitches, like, right, who can come back at you with your own story, but also the fact that, there's a stereotype about Black women being strong and not having the space to be vulnerable or to be soft. You know what I mean? And so like, I wanted to touch on that, because I think that the difference in our experiences, I feel like is rooted in that. Like that's a big factor. And so like, I'm going to go back again. I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer the question just yet, but because I had so many ideas while y'all were talking.
This is so Nicole. She was like, let me just whip out my notebook.
I know, I'm like, I'm going to take this conversation in a totally different direction, by the way. So this idea that you talked about, Sydia, about I wasted my time, because if I don't follow the plan, then I wasted my time. I wasted all this money. Like I came to Georgia Tech too. I went to community college in Miami, my hometown. And then I moved up here with nothing, literally nothing. I had to take out loans, private loans. Cause at the time this was like, I couldn't get, I didn't have a cosigner, and I couldn't get like a lot of government loans, or it didn't add up to what I needed. And that shit was like Georgia Tech, like with people who have Hope Scholarship compared to somebody who's out of state and paying like $30,000 just for the tuition. And this was like 15 years ago or however long it is since I've been in college. But like, yo, that was a lot. It was a lot. And like, it was a lot of money. I'm still, you know, I'm still dealing with the debt and everything. But like, one of the things that I was lamenting to Ashley when I was in career counseling was like, dang, like I really could have done, if I had just had chosen a different path or a different science, like, you know, like I wasted my time doing this PhD in astrophysics. Like I wasted my time. Like, what am I going to do with this? And she said something that really hit me hard. I've never forgotten. She said that like, it's not that I wasted my time, because like if I hadn't gone through what I went through in my PhD program, how would I be able to help people? You know, like all of that help would be theoretical, and that's the entire problem, right? But because I went through it and because I had that lived experience, now I can turn to someone who is having that lived experience and empathize with them and say, I know exactly how that feels because I've been there. You know, so that in itself is valuable, right? And oftentimes, like, I feel like for me, I'm like speaking to myself, because for me personally, like, I've never like been about the journey. Like I've always been about the destination. It was always about like, okay, how do I get over there? And even like, you know, with an accomplishment like a PhD, like you think, first of all, for my community, that's huge, right? That's huge. None of my family went to college. My older sisters didn't go to college until like later. And then, so I was carrying so much of like my whole community, bringing that in. So when I was like, this, I don't want to be an academic anymore. Like I had 2 years left. 2 years. It's in a job that I hated, people that had treated me like shit, you know, and I decided to stay partly because I was like, I'm not going to be another statistic. I'm not going to be another Latina who like drops out of the pipeline, and I can't disappoint my community, right? Which is so huge. And like, we don't often talk about that, but like, yeah, it's like, even with that accomplishment, you know, feeling like a failure and like, not being able to move forward. I think it's important to realize that like that whole time, even though I was focused on the goal, there was actually a process, and therapy is actually something that helped me really understand, because, you know, people are always like, oh, it's about the journey, not the destination. And you kind of like have it here, but you don't really internalize it, right? It doesn't become part of your body, part of you, right? And then, so for me, it was like, when I went to therapy for the first time, I went to therapy for the wrong reasons. Like I came in there and I was having some problems with my ex-boyfriend, right? And I go in there and I'm like, we resolved it in like 2 sessions, okay? And then she was like, but based on your intake form, you have like all this trauma. Like, are you sure you don't want to talk about these things? You know what I'm saying? Going there and, you know, saying, I have this problem, fix me. I'm like a straight A student, right? I'm like, give me homework. Tell me what I can do to like get past this. You know, I want to like, even the trauma, I was like, all right, I come in therapy boot camp. I know we got to cry. I know we got to, you know, dive really deep. Let's go. Like, let's go. Get me out of this. Right. And over time, I really came to internalize that, like, oh shit, it's not like I might be in therapy for the rest of my life, you know? And I'm not mad at that, because I'm like, there's always going to be something I want to work on, you know? But it's like, I'm in that place now after years of trying to do that, like, let's fix it, let's go, and not really sitting in it and realizing that that process is what is going to get me there.
You know, we're all like, I'm from New York. So this is a go mentality. Like, no, after high school, you just keep going. After this, you just keep going. Like, it is built into us. And one of the major things moving down here to Atlanta really made me see life differently, the lifestyle. And it afforded me, to play back off of you, Nicole, the time to really like, there's a difference in understanding, like, it's the journey, not the destination, and then to really embody that. And sometimes you really need the space to do that too. And in New York, like, you have bills and you got to go and you got to get on this train and you got to be, and it becomes so much a part of your psychology. You don't even recognize that it's built in you. And it wasn't until I came down to Atlanta, I was like, down here, I'm afforded the opportunity to like really explore what it is that who I am. Like money wasn't such like a pressing issue, like how it is in New York, that it was like I had the flexibility to begin the actual process and to accept what this process was, because it doesn't take, as you said, like I could figure out this surface stuff in like two sessions, but the real things that we have been really dealing with, that we don't even acknowledge what our experiences were in these schools, like to even have this conversation, to one, be open enough to do it, to be around people that could understand that experience in a very good, you have to be talking to people that went through school to like a very long time. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a very privileged conversation to have too. Like, how are you going to boo-hoo about, oh my God, look at you and your master's or your PhD? But, and so you could take that in there, but there are very real challenges with that. And as you said so beautifully, like, having that experience is what makes us an expert in our field. And it allows us to expand that lane. Like so often the path has just been a singular way, and we are spread, like opening it up. And it's difficult, but you can see the reward, the value of it. Like, even though this has been difficult, the whole time I've been very clear that this was necessary and important too.
But agreed, Sydia. This is what I'm thinking too. Like we're all service provider people. Like our businesses all are about the give back. So I think that we're gonna open up some Q&A, I think, pretty soon. But before, I do want to talk about like, I feel like it's built into all of our businesses, the give back to the community. So if you guys have any thoughts on that, or like, I don't know. I know why it's for me. But if you want to say why, or like if you think it's something that we should do as persons of color, please break it down.
Going out and looking for places and trying to, find places to do things, as someone who didn't go to art school. I went to school, I studied biology and fucking psychology and then education. I didn't go to art school, so it's like I didn't have access to these places because I'm like, you can see these masterpieces back here, but it's like I can't go to the High Museum and be like, hey, I'm ready to do my thing. I got my shit ready. Here we go, showtime. I can't do that. You learn to, when you start dealing with dumb shit, like I was like, I need to figure out how people like me, someone maybe didn't go to art school, or if you got something artistic that you want to do, how can you do that in a place, in a city where you see other people doing that shit? So I wanted to create something so people could do the things that they wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? I get it, but I feel like, Atlanta needed something where people could do show and tell. Like I said, coming from a teaching background, we did show and tell type things, presentations and shit. That's when you get the flex, and be like, hey, look at what I did. So this is a creative version of just show and tell without excluding you from telling your story. Show me what you're working with. I'm not going to tell you, no, you can't do this. Yeah, I'll take all this shit down so you can put all your shit up so you can do your thing. But all that being said, that's the reason why all this came about, because I didn't, as a person who, does art, I wasn't able to access creative spaces here in Atlanta. People would be like, nah, you can't do this. Or, people will see the art and they'll be like, oh, no, you can't, we can't put that in here. I'll be like, what you talking about? What you mean? You know what I'm saying? Even to add insult to injury, this is, like I quit teaching, or I gave up teaching because of the art. When I was teaching, the last year I was teaching, somehow like my students found out that I was teaching in the country, an hour away from the city. Somehow they found out that, I had some shit going on up here in Atlanta. The school board or whatever was like, oh, you're doing art that's immoral. You're doing shit that's immoral. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm doing figurative drawings, just like you would see at the High Museum, where y'all took students to. I'm just doing shit, just regular art. Like, what are you talking about? So I gave up that shit because, they trying to say that I'm moral for doing therapeutic coloring, drawing therapeutically to make me feel good, especially having to come deal with some hypocritical bullshit in the school system. So all of this is just, my way of saying, hey, you come be yourself, no hurdles. I'm here for people to come express themselves, and that's what it's all about. That's how you connect with motherfuckers for real. Because, like, the people that I meet, everything is cool. It's no drama, no static. Everybody's cool. It's good energy. And that's what I like to work with. And that's why I don't really consider myself an entrepreneur. I'm just Paul. I'm that dude. You meet me. We're going to have a good vibe. We're going to share perspective at the museum about a perspective. And it's cool. And that's how it goes down, That's all. I just had to get that off my chest.
Thank you.
Yeah. I also want to address Nisa's question because how do you find the community? Because that has been one of the issues that I have had with finding my people per se. And the first person I found in my group was Porsha. And it was years ago. And she was doing some event and she put it on like Eventbrite or something. And my other friend, who was definitely the one that would look on Eventbrite, she was like, girl, let's go. And she signed us up. And of all the women there, they were all great. Like, I think a big part in finding your community is that for myself, I had to outwardly acknowledge the light that I'm seeing in other people. I had to do that. Like, it was evident to me upon meeting Porsha that she was like this facilitator, that what gravitated around her were people like me. And I don't have that. Like, I can talk to anyone, but I don't like deeply connect. Like, I'm going to share and I'm going to keep it moving. Porsha had this way of facilitating conversation with everyone. And I saw that. And it was like, Sydia, you need to keep this in your world, basically. And it made me hold myself accountable to maintaining our friendship too. You know what I mean? Because I knew that this woman was going to be important in my own personal development. And from there, a lot of the people that I have emotionally connected with have honestly been introduced to me by Porsha because she has this skill. And it would be naive, silly hateration of a person and almost stop yourself from your greatness if you do not surround yourself with other people that it's not just like, oh my God, they have something to give me. It really is seeing their light, what their purpose is, and respecting that and feeding into that as well. That's one of the main, and my group is not that huge, Nisa, either. I think a lot of people think when we think of like a tribe of people, that it's like hundreds of people that every day we're talking to folks. It's, for me, I have a value in quality over quantity, because it takes me a while to really be vulnerable to people. I have to invest a lot in individuals. I choose my people a lot based off of their sensitivity, how they communicate, like how it's going to meld with me. Doesn't mean we're the same. It means that I recognize this person's going to push me, that this person's going to tell me the truth in a way that I can receive it, not like mean or anything, like honestly, like really being able to say, I want to invest my time, my energy, and have them do the same thing. That's how I found my community. So I just wanted to answer that question.
Moving to Atlanta, I was like 27 or 8. And I was like, how the hell am I going to make friends at this age? Like, I'm not in college. I don't know what to do. And then as a entrepreneur, I was by myself. So I wasn't working anywhere. Like, I feel like you make friends at work. I was definitely like, how am I going to do this? So I ended up building a community, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, I'm not finding what I'm looking for. But I ended up doing it really by starting a blog. So I guess it would be like putting out content that would be relevant to other people. And then that's how I found my people. I think I would look for the content that people are putting out that I'm interested in, I guess, to see where to find my people. But yeah, that was a hard thing to be an adult. Like, how do I find folks to be around?
I also think that there are resources now that help people to find community. So I will say, if people are interested in finding community, there are organizations whose sole purpose is to help you do that. So one of those organizations is Black Women in Visual Arts. And that was literally founded to help Black women who are art administrators to engage with each other, because much like Paul was saying, Atlanta is filled with a lot of artistic silos. So if you're not in this niche community, if you're not in this small group of people, you won't know what's happening and you won't be introduced to different opportunities. So that's also something to consider when forming community. And I want to get to Savannah's question. Savannah says, y'all have spent so much time and hard work defining your lives and goals to depart from the plan that's presented as successful. What do you think would be better to present to people when they are younger and thinking about their future? Sam.
Well, I work with kids every day, and to me, the answer is being more aware of all the possibilities and opportunities around them. Like, for instance, in a very practical way, like when you see a child exhibiting an interest in an area, acknowledge it. And not only acknowledge it, tell them what they can do with that skill. Oftentimes it's like, oh, you like to write? You can become a writer. You can write for a newspaper, as opposed to you really saying, oh, writing is an art form. You can do copywriting. You could do social media management now. Like, really placing it in different perspectives so they can see how certain skills, as Nicole was saying, can really be used in a bevy of ways, and giving them those ideas and those examples.
Yeah, so being open to other examples. Yeah, and just not following a straight path. Because I know, first of all, guys, Savannah did my branding. You all can visit GOWRKGRLS.io to see my new website. It's cute as hell, thanks to Savannah. I just launched it today. But anyways, thinking about, because I know Savannah, like thinking a little bit more about the question. So like, yeah, when I was in school, I was on this, like, I didn't think, okay, so there was news management, and I did not think I needed to take news management, because I was like, I'm not going to be a manager of a newspaper. This is ridiculous. So to Sydia's point, like, just seeing the opportunities that there are more than just the path that you're thinking. So I feel like, yeah, just not pigeonholing yourself to like one thing that you think is supposed to be for your field, or yeah, you're supposed to do this. My mom's like, you're supposed to be a lawyer. Although I do love true crime, that's not where I wanted to take that love of true crime to my lawyer life. So yeah, I feel like younger, thinking about your future, just being open-minded, and as to Paul was saying, like, not giving the what other people think you're supposed to do. You have to find yourself, and like, people are gonna combat you. I'm the only entrepreneur in my family. This life does not make sense to them whatsoever. Like, the fact that it's like, oh, you are choosing not to have health insurance and be part-time. Like, what are you doing? You're almost 35. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain this to you. It's not going to make sense. So we're just not going to talk about it. It's a lot of like shutting people out of this, what you're trying to do also, I think. Now they're just kind of like, let's not even talk to her about it. Or why don't I have kids? Like, it's all the societal norms I was talking about, combating those and just being secure in that. Like, I'm just doing what I want to do, and I'm going to do that. As long as you don't have to ask people for money, because that puts you in a different place when you got to rely on them.
That's true. Earlier in the conversation, when Nicole was speaking about her personal experience with therapy and the traditional education, Denise says, I'm about to start a PhD program, and I very much feel that weight. Thanks for sharing, Nicole. So, Nicole, is there anything specific that you can share with us about what it looks like to find balance and stability and therapy within your PhD program? How do we go about looking for those resources so that if this individual wants to continue, they can?
Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely. It's funny because everywhere as a consultant, like I go pre-COVID, right? I was visiting all of these different departments around the country, and like everywhere I go, I pick up new mentees, because when I go and I speak and I give a workshop, like I'm the first, often like the very first like person of color they've ever seen with a PhD in their field, you know, just that alone, like, makes people want to open up to me and like tell me their stories. And it's like, I see absorbing their trauma and reliving my trauma. Right. So the work is very heavy. Like, it's very, very heavy, especially because like the communities that I support are all like marginalized students. That's kind of like my focus. Whenever I create content or anything like that, I focus on that experience because often those are the groups that have the least power. You have to know, cultivate awareness and social consciousness to understand what is happening to you. Because what happened to me is that I came into it and I was getting all of this negativity, all of this pushback, all of these obstacles being put in my way. And I internalized that, you know, I thought it was something wrong with me, you know, Porsha mentioned imposter phenomenon earlier. And I have a workshop on imposter phenomenon, but most of those workshops focus on, you have imposter phenomenon, how do you fix it? Right? Versus like when I do it, it's like, let's look at the environment. Let's zoom out a little bit. And what about this environment is imposing those imposter thoughts on you? What about the environment is sending you the message that you are not good enough? Because it didn't like, you know, imposter phenomenon isn't born, like we're not born with it. We learn it. We learn it from our environment, right? And so for me, it's about, I didn't realize that it wasn't my fault, that what I was experiencing had to do with both my gender and my ethnicity in a place that was very white and very male, and also upper middle class. And I was coming in, you know, as someone who grew up in poverty and like didn't have access to the same things that my white peers had access to, right? So when I started taking a race and ethnic relations class in my fourth year of grad school, because I figured, oh, you know, if I don't do astronomy, maybe I can do public outreach and like teach, you know, like be the next like Neil deGrasse Tyson or whatever, right? And so I was like, okay, I want to do that, but I want to focus on the audience being people of color. And so I was like, you know, I have the experience of being a Latina, but I don't have all these other experiences. So let me go and learn about them so that I can like properly serve my audience, right? So I started taking some sociology classes, and that race and ethnic relations class like really blew my mind. It really kind of opened the door for like understanding, beginning to understand oppression and how that works, and how in my little academic bubble, right, in the Ivy Tower, it's not removed from bias, especially in science. And I'm sure, Paul, like, you know this too, right? Like what they tell you is that they're so above bias. They're so objective and stuff, but that's not actually true, right? And so for me, it was about learning, becoming aware of what the mechanisms are in the system that's embedded to push you out, right? So number one, cultivating that awareness, learning and unlearning things, right? About like the toxic culture, the overwork culture, burnout culture, you know, this like lone genius, you know, false meritocracy mentality, right? And then it's about, okay, now that you know all those things, right? Because that can send you into a deep depression. All of a sudden you realize like how fucked up the world is, in not just that, like we know it's fucked up, but then when you start to look at like, these are the exact ways in which it's fucked up, that can really send you. I think that you know, after kind of becoming aware, it's about like empowering yourself too. Right. And I did that through therapy. I had to process a lot of things, you know, by the time I finished my PhD, I was like, if I had just had one person who was supportive of me, just one person, I would still be doing astronomy. It's not because I wasn't smart enough or anything. I had so much potential and these people squandered it. And that's a lot. That's a lot. And I had to process that. I'm still processing it, you know, years later, like, cause it's really heavy and, you know, it's really, you know, important to kind of process those emotions and allow yourself to feel them. So it's like, I tell every single student I work with, the first day you start grad school, go to the counseling center. That's number one. If you're a person of color, ask for a person of color therapist, right? Because I've had white therapists before and that was a mess. Like, not saying that they will always be a mess, but it's just the extra layer of having to explain your experience that is like it's like, it adds something else that you don't really want that to be. But then it's also like finding community. So there's this thing called a counter space, which is where it's a space, it can be virtual, it can be a relationship, it can be a physical space, but it's a place that you can be your whole self, and everything that you get from that space counteracts all of the other like stereotypes and all of the microaggressions and all the negativity, right? And counter spaces are when you look at people who have made it, right? Made it through, you know, the pipeline and made it to the end of the PhD and beyond, right? In STEM, but I'm, you know, in other fields as well. Because let's be honest, like racism is everywhere, right? When you look at that, the difference between people who have persisted and the people who did not persist was counter space. They had a space that they could go. For me, by the time I found that, it was too late for me. I was already done. I was already completely over it. But my sociology class and the classes that I took that I didn't tell my advisor about, that I was doing it on the down low, right? Those were classes where I felt affirmed, first of all, aligned with my values. The people around me were so much more diverse than my department, right? And I was learning about things and hearing other people's experiences, and I felt validated and heard, right? So a class being a counter space is, you know, I never imagined that it would be, but at some point I started hanging out in the Latinx organization, student organization. It's all undergrads in there. I mean, I was like the oldest person there by far, but I started just going and eating my lunch there, you know, a couple of days a week. And I didn't know anyone. So I literally was just eating lunch by myself just so I could hear Spanglish, my native language, like being spoken around me. And that validated me too, right? And so there's so many things, like finding mentors outside of my department, that people that were actually supportive, finding Ashley, my career counselor, who was really my champion in a way that I was not seeing from my advisor or from anybody else in my department, right? So it's like, there's so many things, like a starter kit that you need. You need therapy, you need a counter space, several counter spaces, and you need mentors outside of that. If you have that, because like if you understand that the things that's happening to you, it's not you, it's the system, right? Once you are able to process emotionally what that means, then you don't internalize it, right? It doesn't become part of your like self-criticism or self-loathing. You understand that it's like way bigger than you, right? And not that can be maybe disempowering sometimes, but it can also be empowering in a sense, because you're like, I'm not the only person going through this, and there are other people who are going through the same thing.
Thank you so much for sharing those, I guess, tips with us. I don't know, I feel like it's a lifestyle that you've shared. I don't anticipate getting a PhD, but knowing these resources exist and that there is space for me to feel seen, if I did consider it, I would feel safer in doing so. I will close with this. I appreciate you all sharing space and time with me. I appreciate you being inside when outside looks so beautiful. Atlanta Contemporary is on a mission, and more specifically, I am on a mission to make Atlanta Contemporary a safer space for people of color, people who may not fit a tax bracket that is higher than like $10,000 a year. I want to make art more accessible to students and people who are from disenfranchised communities, including people on the spectrum. So one of the things that I'm working on is the Contemporary Zine Project, and that is all of our art projects and activities put into a zine that will be distributed to children who are in the West Side, the West End, East Point, through different organizations and people who come from non-traditional backgrounds. I also have started the Contemporary Classroom program, which is to make contemporary art accessible for teenagers and young adults who are interested in experimenting with what art and, just creativity looks like. So if you are all interested, I'd love for you to check those things out and go to our Power to Give campaign to give so that we can keep on giving to the community. With that said, thank you so much, all of you, including the panelists and the participants, for coming in. Have a great Saturday.